Hi guys, got our new book. It's Little Bigfoot, Big City. So this should be interesting. Like I said yesterday, we're done with afternoon reading work. I figure I'll give you guys a break for the rest of the year. There's not much time left. And I'm just going to read to you in the afternoon so you could listen if you'd like. And that's it. So here we go. Chapter 1, Alice. We're back to Alice. As much as she hated school, Alice Mayfair had always hated school vacations even more. At least while she was at school, there was always hope, a glimmer of chance that some kid might like her or some teacher would befriend her, a tiny bit of hope that her life could turn around. Time with her parents offered no such possibilities. They didn't really like her. Worse, they were ashamed of her, and nothing Alice could do or say could change that. Mark and Felicia Mayfair had arranged her life so that they saw as little as possible of Alice. When she wasn't away at one of the 8 different schools she's attended, she was at camp. When she wasn't at camp, she was spending a week with her beloved granny in Cape Cod, the only place she'd ever felt happy. It was only for the beautiful days that she wasn't in one of those 3 places that she stayed with Mark and Felicia, whom she learned long ago not to call Mom or Dad. Her mother was an elegant, slender woman, always in a dress or skirt and high heels, her hair sleek and glossy, her mouth always painted red. Her father was handsome in his suits and polished shoes, with a newspaper and iPad tucked under his arm, and a look on his face that let the world know he was very important. Then there was Alice, tall and broad, her hair a tangly mess, all stained clothes, clumsy hands, and big feet. Alice, who resembled neither of her parents, Alice, who really didn't fit in. Now that she had learned the truth about herself, that she wasn't human, and that her parents weren't really her parents, and that her home was not really her home, for the first time Alice didn't feel ashamed or like she wanted to make herself smaller. Alice felt free. She left the boarding school, the Experimental Center for Love and Learning, on a chilly morning in December to start her winter break. It was an early afternoon when Lee, her parents' driver, dropped her off at her apartment building in New York City, Upper East Side. Alice waved at the doorman, looked at the elevator, and went in all the way up to the penthouse and found her parents waiting for her at the door. She hugged her mother, flinging her strong arms around Felicia's narrow shoulders, feeling Felicia's body stiffen, seeing the startled look on her face. "Look at you," said Mark, and instead of slumping or slouching or trying to rearrange the curls that had escaped from her braids, Alice stood up straight and met his eyes. And did her father flinch a little bit when she looked at him? Not so sure. Was Felicia looking at it little sneakily and strange as she stroked Alice's hair with her fragile hand? It didn't matter. They weren't her parents. She didn't belong to them, and that knowledge, a secret tucked up and hidden like a butterscotch in her cheek, let her smile away. "I thought I'd make us dinner." Her parents exchanged a surprising look. "You can cook?" asked Mark. "She took a cooking class at school," Felicia said, letting Alice know that at least one of her so-called parents had glanced at the narrative assessment the Experimental Center for Love and Learning sent home instead of report cards. "I'll go grocery shopping," Alice announced before her parents could object. "We'll eat at 7. After a moment of startled silence, her parents agreed and handed over her credit card. Alice found her apron in her suitcase and went to the apartment's airy, immaculately, rarely used kitchen to get started on the meal she imagined and planned on serving at the small table in the kitchen instead of the enormous one in the dining room, where they typically ate on rare occasions when all 3 of them dined together. "They tested your blood, and it isn't human." That was what Jeremy Bigelow said, the so-called Bigfoot hunter who had been hot on her friend Millie's trail and told her that morning. At first, Alice had been shocked and scared. Was she a space alien? Some kind of mutant? But almost immediately, she realized that this could mean if she wasn't human, she might be Yar, what humans call Bigfoot. She might be a part of the same tribe as Millie, her best friend, which, of course, would be wonderful. Maybe that's why being Yar was only possibility that she ever considered, the only thing that she thought might be true. Also, as far as she knew, being Yar was the only possibility. During one of their early conversations, right after Alice had learned the truth about her friend, she asked Millie whether or not if Bigfoots were real, then other things might be real too. What other things? Millie asked. Alice felt uncomfortable. She caught the way Millie's voice had gotten a little louder when she said things, as if Alice had implied or meant to suggest that the Yar were different, less important category of humans. I don't know. Vampires, hobbits, the abominable snowman? Millie had thought, then shaken her head. I'm not really hearing those things. She said, probably they are the stories that the no-furs tell their littles to keep them behaving, like the bad red suit no-fur, which of course you call Santa Claus. Alice had a smile. Remember how Millie had told her the Yar legend of no fur in the red suit who snuck down Yar chimneys each December and stole the toys of the bad Yar boys and girls and gave them to the no furs, and how Alice had explained how the Yar had twisted the story of Santa. How about the Loch Ness Monster? Alice asked. Oh, she's real, Millie said immediately, but very, very shy. And she also really doesn't like to be called Monster. Alice's mouth dropped, her eyes got wide, and Millie started to giggle. And Alice, knowing that Millie was teasing her, but not in a mean way, started laughing too. Alice probably had real parents, Yar parents, out there somewhere who were looking for her and who would love her when they found her. Being Yar would explain all the ways that she was different, bigger and taller than the other girls, with big hands, big feet, and wild, tangly, and unruly hair. She would find her parents, and she would find her people, and everything would make sense. And most of all, she wouldn't be lonely anymore. Alice opened the refrigerator. There was a quart of almond milk that she recognized from her last visit home, 2 sad-looking apples, a container of green sprouts, and another of tofu, a tub of fat-free Greek yogurt, a jar of maple syrup. Alice knew had never been poured onto pancakes, but instead been mixed with lemon juice and cayenne pepper when their mother did a cleanse. Felicia was hovering, practically wringing her hands. I'm sorry, she said. If I'd known you were going to cook, I would have got some staples on hand. It's all right, said Alice, who was feeling generous. She planned the dish that Kate, the school cook, and Alice's instructor had served in the dining hall. Butternut squash baked with honey and maple syrup, stuffed with mixture of rice, black beans, and goat cheese. Any kind of squash is okay, Kate told her, and you can put anything you've got in for the stuffing. It's a very forgiving recipe. Of course, Kate hadn't told her what to do when you had nothing. Kate had probably never even imagined a kitchen as bare as this one. Alice walked to the grocery store on the corner. There she took her time picking out the firmest squash and sweet-smelling onion, the biggest head of garlic, and bought nutmeg and cinnamon, selected a cylinder of goat cheese, scooped up rice in a paper bag. At home, she washed her hands and located a knife and the cutting board, as well as a pot for the rice and a baking dish for the squash, both of which looked very brand new. For a while, Felicia watched from the doorway, balancing lightly on her heels, slim as a blade of grass in her skirt and blouse, asking Alice if she needed any help turning on the oven, telling her to be careful with the knife. Alice shook her head. I'm fine, she said. She was thinking of the sweater that she had draped neatly over Felicia's shoulder. The sweater Alice knew would never dream of slipping, and the skirt's hem would never be crooked, and not a strand of her mother's hair, straightened hair, would dare fall out of place. Alice settled the squash on the cutting board and used the knife almost as long as her arm to slice it open with one long, exact stroke. Look at you, said Felicia. If her mother was slim as grass, then Alice was sturdy as an oak tree. She was strong and fast. She could run for miles. She could leap over fallen logs. She could swim across the lake and tow another girl to safety. She had saved Millie and saved the entire Yar tribe. And now finally, Alice knew the truth about herself. And now finally, she was going to find out where and whom she really belonged. Felicia was still watching. She watched Alice smash cloves of garlic and dice the onion while she cooked the rice and tossed the spices and crumbled the cheese and the crumble of cheese. Eventually, Felicia drifted over to the breakfast bar where no one had ever eaten breakfast and sat on the stools, which had never held anything but a newspaper or purse or a stack of fashion magazines. Alice drained the golden raisins that she plumped in the mixture of cider and vinegar. That looks delicious, said Felicia. I can make lots of things, said Alice, offering her mother a spoonful of stuffing. Lasagna, curried tofu, Persian rice. Her mother nodded, then looked at her. Alice readied herself for the usual scrutiny, for the way her mother's mouth would get tight and her nostrils would flare like she'd smelled something unpleasant. When she inspected Alice's midriff or her hips, there was always something wrong with Alice's appearance. A sweater that had gone too tight, a hang of hair that had slipped out of her braid, a rip or a stain on one of her outfits. Alice had been told again and again, we're not slimming the stuff that she wears. Slimming, of course, was Felicia's highest praise for a piece of clothing. I like your outfit, Alice said. Felicia settled on. One of the girls at school made it for me. Her name is Tally. She likes to sew, she said. Tally Nuttleman, her roommate, and her not quite friend, but not quite not friend, Alice reminded herself, had made her a jumper as a holiday gift. The experimental center welcomed learners of all religions while observing no holidays, but before the winter break, the students were allowed to exchange handmade holiday gifts. With Millie's help, Alice made her bunkmates rosemary, sugar scrubs, and lavender-infused honey, and baked them in a tin of cookies to take home. Tally had sewn them all jumpers, soft corduroy dresses that could be worn over shirts, tights, or leggings. Alice's golden brown hair and its straps fastened with bright orange buttons. Felicia opened her mouth, preparing to say something, then closed it without a word. Alice bent, sliding the pan of squash into the oven. 17 days, she told herself. 17 days. 10 of them in Hawaii, and she could go back to school. Alice's father set the table, and Alice sliced the cranberry nut bread that she had baked at school and brought home in her suitcase. There were bottles of sparkling water, candles, little dishes of soft salted butter on the sideboard, a cake box tied with a pink twine. Ladies, said Mark, holding out first his wife's chair, then Alice's. He took 2 slices of Alice's bread, then grinned at his wife. Come on, he said, poking Felicia's arm with the bread basket. Felicia looked predictably horrified as she murmured something about an upcoming black tie gala, and she wouldn't fit into her ball gown. Before selecting the smallest slice and setting it on the very edge of her plate. Wow, said Mark, you're really going crazy. He gave Alice a grin. Alice smiled back and wondered, maybe Mark was her real father, actual father. Maybe he'd met a yar somewhere in the world and fallen in love, except she couldn't imagine where, on his travels, her father, who had spent his entire life in suits in big cities, might have come across someone from Millie's tribe. Nor could Alice imagine her father in the embrace of a woman like the yar she'd glimpsed at during one of Millie's trips in the village. The yar women were large, and they wore simple homemade dresses and were typically barefoot, with tops of their feet covered in fur and their calloused soles impervious to spines, to twigs, thorns, spines, and cold weather. Their eyes, framed with long curly lashes, looked startlingly lovely on their faces, which Alice thought were regular lady faces underneath the fur. She smiled at the thought of Mark in a suit with his arms around a woman with a wild tangle of hair and fur covering her arms, legs, and face. Something funny? Mark inquired. Alice shook her head. She served each of her parents a portion of the squash and dug in, enjoying the richness of the cheese, the sweetness of the honey, and the texture of the perfectly cooked rice on her tongue. It was the kind of thing Millie could be eating right at this moment, she thought. Except Millie wouldn't be at a table in a fancy apartment with her parents, who seemed to have very little to say to each other and nothing else to say to to her. Millie would be deep in the woods, sitting at a fire in a cozy little house tucked under a hill, snug between her parents who loved her so much, surrounded by her tribe. Honey, what's wrong? Felicia was looking at Alice from across the candlelit table. Nothing, Alice said. She made herself smile and buttered another bite of bread. So that is it for that chapter. This is kind of a long chapter, so I broke it in half. So I will finish this chapter tomorrow, this chapter about Alice. And you guys have a great day, and I will see you later. Bye.